All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today's session. We've got Ashley Bolick with us from Western Piedmont Council of Governments and Rose Moon with us from Caldwell Community College. So I'm going to turn it over to them and let them introduce themselves, tell you who they are and what they do. And then what we're going to do is I'll ask them, we'll alternate asking the questions, and then y'all can just tell us, from an HR and a hiring point what you're looking for from these questions and from students interviewing or people interviewing with you, I should say. So, Ashley, do you want to get us started?
Sure, be happy to start. My name is Ashley Bolick, and I'm the Director of Administrative Services and Human Resources here at Western Piedmont Council of Governments. We're located in Longview or Catawba County, but we serve the area of Caldwell, Catawba, Burke, and Alexander County, and we are a local government. We work with the local governments in those 4 areas. I've been here at the COG for almost 6 years now. It's striking how quickly time goes these days, but 6 years I've been in this role at the COG, and prior to that I worked for the Department of Commerce, the NC Work Centers, which I hope you guys are familiar with, and I was there for a few years, and then I worked in human resources at a local banking institution before that. I've been in HR, I guess, for 15, 16 years now, and I love it. I love working with people, and the hiring process is probably one of the most enjoyable parts of my job.
Thank you.
And my name is Rose Moon. I'm the Director of Human Resources at Caldwell Community College. I've been with the college just over a year, and before that I was at another community college not far from here. And I've been in human resources altogether officially for about 5 years. This is my second career. So my first career was as an early childhood educator, and specifically as a director in the field. So when you work in early childhood as a director, you're kind of the human resources for the whole program. So learned my love of human resources there and decided to translate that to this specific role, and been interviewing people for over 20 years. So I have heard all kinds of wonderful answers, and I'm excited to share about them today. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you both. All right, so we'll get started. Ashley, I'm going to start with you. I'm going in alphabetical order. So if you can, the first question is, tell me about yourself. So what you're looking for when you ask that question to potential hires.
This is really a funny question to ask people who are being interviewed, because like Rose said, you get all kinds of things. But what we are really wanting to know is your skills and attributes, what makes you qualified for this position that you're being interviewed for. We are not asking about your, relationship status or how many children you have. In fact, those are definitely things that you should not share with a potential employer. You should talk about the things that make you qualified for the job. You could throw in something fun and interesting that might make you unique or stand out, like maybe you are, an avid outdoorsman, but nothing that would give away any of your protected class information, like your age, sex, national origin, religion, things like that. So keep it specific to the job you're applying for and the qualifications and skill set that you have that make you a good candidate for the position.
Thank you. Rose, is there anything you'd want to add to that?
No, I think that's superb. The only other thing I would throw in there is keep it short. So nothing is worse than like the 10-minute tell me about yourself. So I usually recommend like a 1 to 2 minute, and go ahead and have that prepared in advance, because every interview you go to, you're going to be asked that question. And it's good to just know what you're going to say right off of the bat instead of really kind of struggling to look for it. So 1 to 2 minutes about yourself. But again, the skills and what you're bringing to the job, not personal information.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Rose, the next one's for you. The question is, what is your greatest strength and or weakness?
So this is probably my favorite interview question. And the first thing I would say about this question is I would immediately reframe the question to say, what is my greatest strength and challenge? So I would say challenge because weakness is inherent, where it's something that's about you that you can't really make a change to, where a challenge is something that you can overcome and you can get better at. So I would always immediately talk about the challenge there. Now, the reason why this is my favorite question is all based on a book I read several years ago that's called Strengths Finder by Tom Rath. And in this book, Tom Rath talks about the fact that whatever your greatest strength is also your greatest challenge. So, meaning, if you're really great at talking to people, well, your challenge might be that you're really great at talking to people too much. Um, so you kind of have to find the thing of like, okay, what am I really great at? But then also frame that challenge is in a way that makes it something that is good as well. So my example for that is my answer to the question is, what am I really great at? Well, I tend to be a perfectionist. I want to be a person of excellence. Well, how is that a challenge? Well, because when you're a person who leans toward perfection, maybe you spend a little bit too much time on things. And so you're taking something that is a challenge, but you're showing how that can be used for good. And so I would just always encourage people that the challenge something that you can work on, not necessarily something that's really terrible as in terms of a weakness.
Thank you. That's a good point. I've never heard it phrased as a challenge instead of weakness. Ashley, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, just comment that I think it's funny, Rose, that you and I would answer that the exact same way. Perfectionism is usually what I tend to lean towards if I'm asked that question personally, because I can flip it around to something that's a little bit more positive, you know. Something I think it's important to realize with this question that their employers are wanting to know how self-aware you are about yourself. You know, some people that we encounter in life have no self-awareness about what their strengths and weaknesses are, our challenges are. So this is something can be almost an emotional intelligent question.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you so much. All right, Ashley, the next question for you. What are you looking for when you ask somebody, how do you handle stress and pressure?
Well, let's face it, every job I've ever had, from, waiting tables to managing human resources at an organization, has its own challenges, stress, and pressure. And so I think we should be open-minded when we go into our interviews, into new career opportunities, knowing that every position, no matter what it is, will be stressful and have some pressure. And I think that the employers that are asking this question are just really trying to gauge how you will handle the work situation that they're going to put you into, hopefully put you into. So hopefully you have some kind of mechanism that you use as a person to deal with stress and pressure. Maybe it's go for a quick walk, count backwards from 10, do some self-reflecting. That's typically what I do. I get an email that kind of aggravates me. I'll walk to the kitchen and get a glass of water and come back. So the employers in this situation are looking to see, one, if you're self-aware and understand that, the position that you're applying for will have its own sets of challenges and stresses and pressures, and how you cope with that, how you handle that, and how professional you'll be in these situations.
Thank you. Rose, anything you want to add?
Well, what I have to say is going to kind of piggyback off of the next question, which I think is you need to have an example to share as well. So think about a time that you've encountered something stressful in your position previously, and how did you handle that, just so you can put some real teeth and make it concrete as you're answering the question.
Right. And you're right, it does kind of piggyback off the question I'm getting ready to ask you. So the question I'm going to ask is, what are you looking for, or describe a difficult work situation or project and how you handled it? So what are you looking for when you ask that type of question?
So the first thing I would encourage is describe a work challenge that you faced. I think often when we hear this question, people have a tendency to uh, reply with a challenge that somebody else put on them or like something that happened in the office. And so you don't want to use this as an opportunity to kind of share the dirty laundry about what happened poorly at your last work place of employment. But really, you want to think about a difficult work situation that you specifically dealt with. Maybe it's because it was a difficult project, or just you maybe had some situation at home that was carrying over into the workplace. You really want to focus on things that affected you personally, because it was a challenge you were facing. And then the back end of it is how you handled it. So it's not just enough to answer the question of what the difficult situation was, but then you also have to show that you handled it well. And again, that's something that people miss. They tied up in explaining the situation, they forget to answer how they handled it.
Ashley, anything you want to add?
I think it's important to remember that these are the top 10 interview questions for a reason, because a lot of times they're used and it may be worded differently from employer to employer, but like Rose said, this is a commonly asked question, and a lot of times people have a hard time answering it. So, kudos to you students who are on this today, because you're learning these questions in advance. You can prepare for them. And, sometimes in an interview situation, it's not necessarily the most qualified person that gets the job, it's the person who interviews the best. So if you can understand what these questions are and what the employers are looking for, and go in with prepared answers, you're definitely going to have a leg up on your competition.
Yep, I agree. All right, Ashley, next question for you. What are your goals for the future, and what are you looking for when you ask that question?
I love this question. People tell on themselves in this question, or answering this question in a lot of cases. I'll give you an example. We recently interviewed for a position here in our regional housing department, and we're not naive. We know people aren't going to come and stay forever, but we were asking the interviewee, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And it was in a completely different profession, the way they answered the question. It was obvious that they had no intentions of staying long term at our organization, which sometimes can be a negative. We want to invest and train and have people who we think might stick around for a while. So if you're going to answer this question, you don't want to lie if you don't intend to be in the area or be at this employer forever, but you need to think about how to answer it in a way that won't turn the employer off. But saying that you want to be in a completely different profession is definitely not the way to answer it.
Yeah. Rose is shaking her head yes.
Well, and Ashley, I appreciate that you added a time frame on that as well, on that question, because that was the little piece that I was going to add. If somebody asks you what your goals are for the future, tell them what your 5-year plan is. Nobody knows what they're going to be doing 20 years from now. So just think about like kind of what your next steps are and help them see that plan of progression you have. But it doesn't have to be your whole life trajectory, just kind of where you're going the next few pieces.
All right, Rose, next question for you is, tell me about the last time a coworker or customer got angry with you and what happened.
So this is another great question that I think is very similar to the difficult work situation. So let's face it, most of the times our difficult work situations are working with other people, whether that be our coworkers or our customers. And so again, I would say, but in this one specifically, it is kind of asking you to almost kind of like tell on somebody, how did you have a difficult time with somebody else and how did you resolve it? So the first thing I would say is you always try to be positive. I always try to approach it from we're all in this together and we're trying to learn something from each other. So instead of trying to throw your customer or your coworker under the bus, try to think about it from their perspective and what they were learning from the situation and what you could take from it as well. So again, just trying to frame it in a positive reference, because let's be realistic, at the end of the day, we don't want to bring coworkers in who we already know from the get-go are going to be negative Nancy's. And so that really does say something in the way you answer it if you're trying to look for a learning opportunity or if you're just being upset and frustrated with people.
Ashley, anything you want to add to that?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Next question for you, Ashley. Why did you want to leave your current position?
I'm going to say almost identically what Rose just said. Don't be negative here. It is easy, particularly if you left a not so great work environment previously, to dish and tell all when someone asks this question, but that is not what the employer is looking for. Never, ever, ever talk negatively about your previous employer. You can always wordsmith a situation and make the reason why you left or why you're wanting to leave more positive if it is indeed a negative situation. So try to stay positive. Maybe you're trying to obtain a new career change, possibly looking for promotional opportunities where you don't have some at the current place that you're working. Maybe it's a location change. Maybe you're trying to move. I think it's important to, we're talking specifically about interview questions, but for people who often get asked this question and it's for a location change, maybe you should address that in your cover letter. I know a lot of times when I'm looking at a resume packet or application packet from someone and I notice that, their current place of employment is in a different state and they're applying for a job here in North Carolina, I kind of want to know why they're wanting to change. And a lot of times I think people who address this in their cover letter tend to have better results when they're trying to get interviews.
Thank
I
you.
think that's a great point. And the other thing I would just caution is don't be disingenuous. So, if you are leaving a poor work situation, you don't have to necessarily say that, but just make sure that you're being truthful. So, look for the little piece of truth you can share. Maybe, like I said, you may have that poor work situation, but you were planning on going back to school and looking for a different field anyhow. And that way you're still sharing your truth without putting a negative perspective on it.
All right, Rose, next question for you. Tell me about the toughest decision you had to make within the last 6 months.
So again, I would piggyback off of Ashley and saying being prepared to answer this question is your best advantage to the question. A lot of times the answer you hear to that is, I don't recall any tough decisions I had to make, or, something along those lines. And clearly we all have tough decisions we have to make. We just need to take a moment to think about it. And I think that would be the best advice I could give about this question or any question in general, is that if you are kind of taken aback and don't know how to answer that question, just take a moment and think about it. It's okay to have to think about how you will answer a question. But again, kind of the framework that we've said for all of these questions: be positive, take responsibility for how you acted in the situation, how did you handle it, and just own up to any repercussions if they were there.
All right, Ashley, for
Yeah,
you.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to, I think a lot of times people who are being interviewed are nervous, and it's hard to come up with answers to these types of questions on the spot. So like we've been saying, preparation is key. Before I say this, I'll say that you have to know your audience, understand the culture of the place you're interviewing for, and whether or not joking might be good or bad. But sometimes if I'm having a hard time thinking about how to answer a question, I might make a joke. And if someone was to ask me, when was the last time in the last 6 months you had to make a tough decision, I might would say, well, what to cook for dinner last night, and that might get people chuckling and laughing, and maybe that's good if you know your environment and it's acceptable. Here at the Western Piedmont Council of Governments, that would be funny and we would all laugh, and it would buy the interviewee some time to really think, well, actually a tough decision I had to make in the last 6 months was what program to study in college, or what career path I wanted to pursue, and then be able to answer the question in honesty. But never miss a good opportunity if you think it's appropriate to make a little joke that might make you memorable.
Thank you. All right. Last question for you, Ashley, is what is your leadership style? What are you looking for when you ask somebody that?
Well, it depends on the job. And one of the best pieces of advice that I was ever given when I was job searching was read the job description and save it, particularly if you're applying for jobs where sometimes you apply for a job months ago and you're not interviewing till months later. And if you didn't save a copy of the job description that you could refer back to, or the job advertisement, and read what it is that truly the employer is looking for, then you might be walking into an interview situation blind. So read the job ad and understand what it is the employer is looking for, and base your answer not solely on what they're looking for. You want to be honest. You don't want to say that you are a team player if you're not, and you really like to work alone. But read between the lines, see what the employer is looking for, and try to give examples, true examples of yourself that make you the ideal candidate based on what they're looking for.
Yeah, I would just add also to be mindful of some flexibility, because no matter where you are in an organization, you're going to lead some people, but you're also going to report to some people. So you have to be able to lead, and you have, if that is the role that you're going to be in. But then also, even as a leader, even as the president of an organization, you still report to the chairman of the board. So no matter what situation you're in, you kind of have to have a flexibility to be able to be in both roles.
Thank you. All right, Rose, you get the last question of the day. So tell me how you think your supervisor or former supervisor would describe you.
So again, I can't emphasize it enough. You want to focus on the positive, accentuate the positive. Again, not in a disingenuous way where you're hiding anything, but just, share what the good things are that your supervisor is going to say about you. I would choose one or two, three things. Again, kind of going back to the beginning, we want to try to make our answers as concise as possible. So don't have a very long soliloquy of all the wonderful things you've ever done at your past workplace. Just give a couple of key points that your supervisor might say about you if they were filling out a reference form.
Ashley, anything you want to add to that?
I'll just say it's a good idea, particularly if you're listing supervisors or whomever you choose to list as references on your applications, resumes, that maybe you ask them what they would say about you if they were asked. Just recently, we were about to hire someone, checking their references, and one of the references they listed was really honest with us, and that changed our hiring decision. So just know that you should be mindful of whom you're listing as references, and understand what it is that they would say about you, honestly, if they're asked by an employer.
And if I may piggyback off of that, non-interview question related, always tell people you're going to list them as a reference because there's nothing worse than somebody getting a call and they're like, I had no idea, or they may not even remember who you are in some instances. So make sure that you ask permission to list somebody as a reference.
All right, guys. Jimmy just put on the chat box, if you will, make sure you sign in for today's session, but also he put on the chat box the survey. Tell us how we did. We thank you both, Ashley and Rose, for doing this. I really do think it's going to be helpful for our students and community members to hear, what y'all are looking for, when people come to interview. So I really appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions for these ladies? You can turn your mic on and ask, or you can type it in the chat box.
I have a quick question. What was the most difficult question that you got when you got the job that you have currently?
One comes to mind, not for my current position, but the position I had previous when I worked for the state for NC Commerce, if I can share that one, Jimmy. I had made a typo on my PD 107, my state application for employment. I transposed a number. And it was obvious to the gentleman who was interviewing me that I had transposed a number. And he asked, you turned in an application for employment. I understand that you transposed a number, but here we're dealing with people's money. We're dealing with unemployment. How, if you are turning in paperwork that has a typo on it, can I trust you to, double check your work and make sure that you're being accurate in all the things that you do? And boy, thinking on the spot on that one was a little tough, but I'm trying to remember exactly how I answered it. I said, well, this is a life lesson here. Going forward, I will always double and triple check my work and application material as I submit it, and I did. It was almost embarrassing, and it has stuck with me all these years. That was a long time ago. I'd say 11 years ago now, and I remember that as the toughest interview question I've ever been asked.
I think that's one thing for us to be mindful as, after all the years of interviewing, is just to be mindful that people are people, and we all make mistakes. And so, just knowing at the end of the day, I think that can release a little bit of nervousness on the part of the person who's going for the interview, is that we're all just normal people, and, we all make mistakes and transpose numbers sometime, and it's okay for that, certainly. Jimmy, my answer to your question was a supervisory question. So how I would handle different coworkers in a situation where they were disagreeing with each other. And that was a really tough question for me, just because I think the manner of question was tough. Sometimes you get questions where it's like you really don't know what you could do in that situation without some more information. And so the point I want to make in saying that is it never hurts to ask for people to kind of like give you more information about the question. So in that particular question, it was kind of really generic. So depending on the personalities in the situation, I would handle it differently one way from the other. So if you can't get clarification by asking a question from the person who's interviewing you, then make your own clarification. So what I did at that point, I said is, if the person was acting this way, I would do X, Y, Z. Or if the employee was acting this way, I would do A, B, C. And so when you get those kind of questions that you need some more information about it, don't hesitate to ask. And if you can't get clarity on it, then clarify it yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, so much. We've had a couple of people say on the chat box, thank you. Today was very helpful. Thank you. And then the last one says, thank you for this information. I also like that Jimmy asked the personal questions at the end. So again, we don't want to hold everybody up, but we do thank you all for joining. And guys, if y'all have questions, you can obviously reach out to us in Career Connections. We'll be happy to work with you. We can do mock interviews with you so you are prepared to go and answer these questions in the future. So yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.